Dr. Rad.
Hey,
I love your name. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, bud. Thank you for having me on.
So just connecting before we got on air, I love your passion for sleep. And my focus on most of my content is on the big three, which is health, wealth, and relationships. And as a performance coach, I spend a lot of time helping people optimize for sleep. And sometimes that frustrates them because they're looking for a magic pill or some new formula or something else. And I want to talk about sleep before we get anything else. I was super excited to have you on. I think we're going to go deep into sleep and things that people can practically do to improve their sleep. But I thought we'd start with a little bit of backstory, how you got into it. You're sharing before we got on. You're a dentist by trade, right, and that's kind of your background. And then in 2009, you had a pretty serious accident, falling asleep at the wheel, and you found out you had sleep apnea.
Yep.
Okay, fill us in from there. How did that lead to what you're doing now? Because that's a pretty wild story.
Yeah, in 2009, I was actually about 15 pounds lighter than this. So people typically think sleep apnea patients are overweight, which that is a problem. Obesity can lead to that. So they gave me, after I crashed my car into a tree, luckily it wasn't any human or anything like that, they gave me a CPAP machine. Unfortunately, I couldn't wear it. And my condition was mild from a home sleep test that I did. And a few months later in 2010, a mouthpiece was put on the map by the American Medical Association as proper treatment for sleep. So first of all, I was patient zero. I made it for myself, excitingly, because...
But you actually made and designed it?
No, I actually just knew what it was.
Okay.
Took impressions or have my staff take impressions of my mouth and a bite. And it positions your lower jaw slightly forward. The tongue is attached to your lower jaw. So bring the lower jaw forward, tongue comes forward, and it doesn't fall back. Exactly. Just like almost like a CPR position. And so made the mouthpiece. Lo and behold, I'm not snoring. It was great for the bed partner at the time. And so, and more importantly, my energy, my mood. Grumpy Dr. Rad was kind of like a nickname for me in the morning because I wasn't doing my song and dance when I walk into the office. And my staff was like, okay, let's give him till 10 o'clock until the coffee kicks in. And you know, at the end of the day, it's all about energy. It's all about being performance, right? Whether it's at your workplace, whether it's with your kids in the afternoon, you know, feeling tired in the afternoon, needing to take a nap, or getting tired enough that you fall asleep at the wheel, sadly. And it's embarrassing that I did that, but it was something that happened that now I've helped over a couple thousand patients over the last 14 years. It's my passion to help people sleep better just because it's a slew of effects on mental health, depression, anxiety, and a third of our life is spent sleeping. So if you're not doing it well, how can we get people to figure out what's going on? The first thing is being tired throughout the day. Or being told that you snore. And some people, I don't have a bed partner. How do I know? Well, there's apps that you can download now that can measure record your snoring.
So you're talking about the impact of not getting enough sleep, and you said a few things there I'm going to come back to, like, well, how do you know whether you're getting good quality sleep? So who would be a good candidate to look at their sleep? Because I deal with every one of my clients. I go through this, and usually I ask those questions, right? Who's your bed partner? Do you snore? Oh, I don't think so. No, they say I do. And would you say, clarifying question there, is snoring always an indication? Is that like...
Yeah, snoring is, there are snorers that don't have sleep apnea.
That's what I'm asking.
The definition of sleep apnea is you have stoppage of breathing for at least 10 seconds or more, and a combination of a shortness of breath, that enough that the machine that they send you at home to record you picks up that score, catches it. So most sleep apnea, 99% of sleep apnea patients do usually snore. So that is a red flag.
Is snoring necessarily bad when you sleep?
Yes, because when
no matter what.
Because when you snore, you don't get that deep breath that produces nitric oxide, which causes a dilation or opening of your arteries to get proper blood flow. So snoring can lead to cardiovascular issues. It can lead to breakup in relationships, sleeping in the other bedroom. And my joke is Dr. Rad brings people back into the bedroom with each other. And it is, sometimes I get the wife or the husband coming in after a week or so wearing the appliance, and they're like, can I give you a hug? Like, absolutely. That's awesome. And that's the social implications. So if you don't have a bed partner, feeling tired throughout the day is one of the big ones. But acid reflux, around 60% of people with acid reflux are because of sleep apnea. That extra effort in breathing pushes the diaphragm, the acid up, and starts destroying that little esophageal sphincter. High blood pressure, diabetes type 2. There's the biggest one.
diabetes type 2 could be caused by sleep apnea?
Yes. Yep. The studies have shown about 48% of diabetic patients is a result of sleep apnea. And if you help them with their sleep, their insulin resistance and their glucose, their numbers go down.
Yeah, I don't think I was aware of that. That's fascinating. So helping relationships stay together since 2010, that's pretty cool. So a lot of people are tired in the morning. That's not uncommon. And you're saying snoring is a leading indicator. Being really tired throughout the day is one. Acid reflux is a good one. And if you're snoring at all, that's not a good sign.
Right, especially if you're under the age of 14. Any child snoring is the biggest red flag. And you can also see this in the signs of your teeth. If you're grinding your teeth, if you look in the mirror and your lower front teeth are kind of worn down or chipping away, that's a sign that you're doing your own jaw movement forward while you're having an apneic event. You're grinding forward to open up your own airway, what a mouthpiece would actually do.
Right.
On the side of the tongue, there are little striations. Don't stick your tongue out in front of too many people, but if you do it in front of a mirror or show somebody, you see a little scalloping or striations on the side of the tongue. That's the tongue pushing against the back of the teeth, causing those little piercings or indentations. That's self-assessment right there to look in the mirror and say, oh, is that happening or not?
Wow. Okay. So somebody says, yeah, I'm tired all the time. I've got acid reflux. Yeah, my partner says I snore. What do they do? What's the next steps?
Yeah, so, some dentists, and I've trained over a few thousand of them now passionately, but even your medical doctor can refer you for a home sleep test. I do like the home sleep test because it's your, environment, that's your pillow. If you have a glass of wine every night, you want to do the basic control kind of environment.
Yep.
The lab test is typically a little bit more for sleepwalking, neurological issues, and has nothing to do with breathing issues, but it does measure that as well. But it's very inconvenient to go to a lab and sleep overnight when you have the next night available to do that, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So home sleep studies, they send you the equipment, you wear it on your finger in a little breathing effort. It measures your pulse as well as how many times you stop breathing or have that shortness of breath. You put it back in the box. And these companies give you a stamp already. You send it back. In about a week, a board-certified sleep physician analyzes the study, sends me the results or your physician. And then you go over the results and say how many times you stop breathing or shortness of breath determines the severity of the disease. So it's a mild, moderate, or severe condition.
And is sleep apnea considered a disease?
Technically, yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's also the newest study from University of Wisconsin, 5 times higher risk of cancer of any kind when you have sleep apnea. 12 to 15 years off your life if you're not being treated for moderate to sleep apnea. I mean, 12 to 15 years off life expectancy. So if you have like a dad,
20% on an average lifetime.
Yeah, it's wild. You hear dad snoring down the hallway, or sometimes you, as a bed partner, you nudge them to and then they move to the side and stop, and start breathing again and stop snoring. It behooves us to get in the driver's seat and really get it tested. And a home sleep test is so easy. Typically, most medical insurances cover it. If not, it's a couple $100 cash fee. Knowledge is power.
Okay, so, and then your treatment is a device you wear in your mouth that forces your lower jaw forward, allowing to clear your throat, essentially, right?
Yep.
Or
the distance between your tongue and the back of the throat.
Yeah, so that you, and how many people would you say completely stop snoring when wearing this device?
Typically 80% of patients you help without they stop snoring. Now, if you and I had a few drinks, they may still snore a little bit, but you can help majority of patients who fall in the category of mild to moderate. Now, there's some severe patients. Those are 30 or more times an hour. That's once every 2 minutes that they stop breathing on that sleep study that they do. They really should be on a positive pressure mask called the CPAP machine, continuous positive air pressure. Very sexy. It works very well if you can get used to it, right? And so, for those
works
people,
really well for sleeping. But
that's about it.
Yeah.
But for those people who can't tolerate the CPAP, even if they are severe, an oral appliance can bring them down to a lower, like a moderate or mild case. And I've done that, and people think, wow, this is amazing. And I still know in the back of my mind they're not healthy, but at least we're lowering their risk factors.
When somebody makes this adjustment, what is the most common positive side effects that you hear?
Energy. Yep. Really, it's all about the fact that they feel like, wow, like I'm mentally more clear, I'm not drained as much, and their mood less anxious, less depressed. I've had patients after a week of wearing their appliance get emotional in front of me. Tell me what, like I literally felt like my kids were a chore in the morning. My husband or wife was, annoying me. And it's that irritability that is really, really improved pretty much right away. And the medical stuff like high blood pressure, acid reflux, diabetes, that takes a couple months. Yeah. Arrhythmias, when your heart's racing to get oxygen and then slows down and then races when you're having apneic events, your arrhythmia, your heart pacemaker naturally goes disarray. And we see a lot of people with rapid heart rate or extra heartbeats. And that can improve wearing a CPAP and oral appliance. It takes a couple of months for your body to regulate itself.
Okay, so now we treat sleep apnea. You get treated. You have the device, which is a lot easier than a CPAP machine for sure. What other things can people do to improve their sleep? Let's say they don't have sleep apnea, but they're like, well, I don't get good sleep. Is there any devices that you recommend to, one, track your sleep, ones that you like, and then what can people do to improve their sleep?
None of them are exact scientifically, just like a sleep study is, but, the Oura Rings, there's apps, the Apple Watch, they all have sleep tracking devices. And really, when you have these types of devices, you got to have a set sleep time. If you start changing your sleep time pattern from 10 p.m. to midnight, and there's a window of opportunity that when we wake up in the morning, if we get about 10 minutes of sunlight, not directly in our eyes, but somewhat hitting our eyes, you start producing naturally your melatonin. And then that perfect time of, if you wake up at 6:30, 7 o'clock, that perfect time to fall asleep is around between 9:30 and 11, because that's when your melatonin levels can peak and help you fall asleep.
Yeah.
And so, of course, getting off our darn phones or laptops at least 30 minutes to an hour before bedtime. For kids, at least an hour, if not more, before bedtime. There have been studies that have shown that they grind their teeth more because they're on electronics, video games. Electronics, TV that's more than 10 feet away is less likelihood to affect your falling asleep, but handheld ones, we're all guilty of it.
Yep.
We're on our phone, Instagram, podcasts, and whatnot, and then plug it in and then try to fall asleep. Your mind is constantly racing. So I wear blue light eliminating glasses.
What time do you usually put them on?
What time do I usually go to sleep?
No, what time do you put the glasses on?
Whenever I'm in bed,
Okay.
if I'm looking at something on the phone. So
Yep.
typically I try to get in at least an hour before bedtime.
Yep. What do you do with your diet? How do you prepare your body for sleep at night? What is your kind of sleep routine look like?
One of the biggest things is you can't have caffeine within 8 hours. And I know people have caffeine and coffee and go, I fall asleep right after. It does still affect your REM. It does affect you getting into REM. And so trying to stay away from heavy food at least 2 hours before bedtime. Alcohol at least 2 hours before bedtime. Alcohol is a huge, I always say to my buddies or any patient, if you're going to go out have a night of drinking and you're into that, make sure you wear your appliance that night or your CPAP machine, because it is your apnea can almost double in certain cases.
Why is that?
Just the natural dryness of the mouth that can occur that makes the tongue like a Velcro hit the back of the throat. And also it just relaxes everything. And when it relaxes the tongue and the soft palate more, you have a higher chance of apneic events.
So I've never really been a huge fan of alcohol, but certainly socially would drink. And then when I got my Oura Ring like 4 years ago, it was just so obvious how bad alcohol was on sleep that I became even more judicious about when I would drink. And my partner would say the only time she would complain about me snoring is after a drink. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, understanding why that was, it became harder and harder to justify drinking at all. Because for me, sleep is the game, right? Hacking your sleep, you're a different, and everybody knows this, I think, inherently. When you wake up from a good night of sleep, you know what that feels like versus not. But alcohol is one. And so you said no caffeine for 8 hours before bed. Totally agree. Food 2 hours, alcohol 2 hours. What else? What else are you doing?
Sometimes we go to the gym and we work out late at night. Yep. We get kind of amped. So we got to be careful
especially
with
if you use a pre-workout.
Exactly. Especially if you use something like that. So you got to be careful with that as well. I like to keep the room dark.
Yep.
Last hour or so before bedtime, you want to use a very low ambient light. Because light, it keeps you in kind of a fight or flight stage. So those are the basics. More importantly, you got to have a set routine on sleep. If you start messing with your biological clock of sleeping or your sleep clock, your body doesn't know, like you're going to still get up most likely at 6 o'clock. The problem is, or 5:30. The problem is we get on Netflix and we start binge watching. Or we got on Instagram or social media and we start watching, and all of a sudden it's like 12:30 and you still got to be at work. The kids are going to be up in the morning. So you got to try to give yourself ideally at least 7 hours of sleep if you can. And it's not just about sleep, it's quality sleep, right? And that's why it really is important to get a home sleep test, asking your physician, or even some dentists out there are now doing it, that can refer you for a home sleep test to be able to know how bad it is.
When you look at kind of your ratios of what phase of sleep you're in, what are you looking for in REM and deep sleep? What do you think are the winning kind of amount of time for those of us who use QS devices that can figure that out?
Yeah, if you can get at least 4 to 6 REMs, you're getting into that ballpark of leptin production.
Yep.
Which helps in...
Why is leptin important?
Yeah, so leptin, so if you and I pulled an all-nighter, the next day we crave pizza, burgers, fries. Carbs like crazy.
Yep.
Not to mention our immune system is affected. That's why more people who have sleep issues have more symptoms from getting the flu, have more symptoms from getting COVID. So if you want to, not have more symptoms from getting sick and have an immune system that's very high, you need to sleep well and breathe well. But leptin is a hormone that also increases your metabolism at rest. And if you and I bottled that, we'd be very, very rich. And you're producing that in REM. And that allows you to literally help lose weight. I've had patients wearing their appliance or been referred to a CPAP tell me they lost 10 pounds or so within the first couple of months, and they haven't done anything different.
It's wild.
But they eat also less amount in a given meal.
Yeah.
So sometimes we eat, I'm like, man,
more satiated.
You feel you eat this much pasta and you're like, okay, what else can I have after this? You're not probably producing leptin. It's like emotional binge eating when you don't get proper REM. You get more REM when you're dreaming. That dreaming state also helps produce more growth hormone. So when I go back to being a kid under the age of 14, especially if you're a kid under the age of 12 and you're growing and going through puberty, snoring, big red flag. Pediatric ENT needs to evaluate the tonsils. So I would always advise a parent to do that if they're grinding their teeth, because that affects their growth hormone levels. And so they've seen ADHD go up, growth hormone levels go down when kids are not breathing well when they're sleeping.
Maybe it's hard to answer. Do you think as a human population we're experiencing more sleep apnea in our lifestyle today than we did 100 years ago? And if so, what conditions in our environment are leading to this? What can we do to prevent sleep apnea, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, so it used to be that 20% of the US population had sleep apnea. Now the number is around 30%. That's a lot. And the more we've become upright, the more our jaw has become kind of like narrow and not more kind of caveman look to it. So the more the jaw is forward, the more the tongue is forward and away from the back of the throat. Also, pollutants in the air have caused for us to become more mouth breathers. The more you become a mouth breather as a child, which is the worst thing, and that was my problem when I was a child. I thought I was Michael Jordan playing basketball. I had my nose hit a couple times, total deviated septum, can't breathe through my nose, became a mouth breather. The more you breathe through your mouth, your palate or the roof of your mouth becomes higher. The more it becomes higher, your soft palate becomes more forward. And so there's less room for air. And so as we've progressed in civilization, that's major. The major things is mouth breathing is really bad. That's why they have now mouth tape that works really nicely. But the problem is throw mouth tape on someone who has allergies and pollutants and congestions and asthma and whatnot. They can't breathe through their nose. They feel like they're suffocating.
Yep.
So, you got to work with an allergist. You got to do your nasal saline solutions every night. Some of these people really are suffering because nasal breathing is what produces nitric oxide.
I was going to ask you what you thought of tape, right? Because that's a solution that I will offer to people, that quick solution, like, hey, see if they can do that. And you, right there at the end, you kind of slipped it in. It's nasal breathing that creates nitrogen oxide.
Yes. And that's why in yoga and meditation, most of the time,
Ujjayi breath.
Yep, yeah. Exactly. We're taking deep breaths through our nose, and that relaxes us. Dr. Huberman is a very good example of that. He talks about how you can reduce your anxiety by taking two deep in through your nose and then exhale. And that usually typically reduces your pulse and opens up the blood flow, so to speak, by vasodilating or opening up the arteries to get more blood, oxygenated blood to the rest of the body, reducing that fight or flight feeling.
So I like the dark room. I elevate my bed slightly. I also keep it pretty cold. I like a cold room.
So what temperature? 68-ish?
64, actually.
Okay. Oh, yeah, you're going cold.
Yeah,
I like it.
And then I'll use a chili pad that goes all the way down to 54. I like when you first get in, it's abrasive, but then there is something so amazing about being warm but surrounded by cold.
Right.
As a guy, my female partners like it a lot warmer than I do. So, and then the other thing is I'm big on silence. What's your thoughts on that? And you didn't bring it up, but I either like it quiet or some kind of ambient music or white noise, something that's pretty mellow. If I'm traveling, I'll usually some kind of white noise because there's usually something in the environment. But
yeah, it's amazing. Even as children or babies, sometimes we have like music in the background in the nursery or some white noise that helps with sleep. Not everybody likes white noise though.
Yeah.
Some people, it affects their sleep because if they're light sleepers, what happens is they hear something and they wake up real quick, and just in a slight change of tone of the music. And typically if you're a light sleeper is because you could be having sleep apnea issues. So I'm not a big fan of noise if you have sleep apnea.
So you prefer silence as much as possible.
Yeah, silent and blackout curtains if possible.
Yep.
That little bit of light that can come out in the morning can really affect you as well.
So, and then I add, and we talked about this before we got on, but I drink chamomile every night. I enjoy chamomile. We're growing our own chamomile now, so it's fun. And then I take a 7-blend magnesium, morning and evening, but that seems to have helped a ton for me. But I like you said, I have a night routine that primes my body for sleep. So as a whole, I've gotten to a point now where I'm really proud of the quality of sleep I've gotten, but I took it very seriously and noticed the difference in that. What are you doing in the morning to prime yourself? You mentioned make sure you get sunlight, but can you unpack kind of your morning routine? If you're teaching somebody, hey, here's how to optimize your mornings to get great sleep at night. That's something that we don't always think about, right? We're like, morning isn't about sleep, it's about waking up. But what can you do in the morning to ensure you get good sleep at night?
Typically when we wake up in the morning, there's a lot of anxiety. You're thinking about your kids going to school, you're thinking about yourself getting to work, your emails that you got. There's a lot of anxiousness. And there's some spiritual kind of thought process. Like when you get up in the morning, you journal. Yeah. You write, pages, 2 pages if you can, or anything that you have gratitude for. People don't understand that, or some people don't understand that you can't be in an anxious state if you're in a gratitude state. Yeah. And you can't just sit there and think gratitude. I'm happy. I have my legs and my arms and my bed. And you actually have to journal it or write it down. And if you can do that in the morning, it gives you a nice little okay, I'm ready for the day. It's all about your morning routine. I have some people that I know that love to do cold showers in the morning to get their, endorphins ready to go and get it going. I do that from time to time. Nervous system reset. Yeah. So, those help for the day. I think the most important thing is just having that routine of getting up at the right time, same time, which is, 5 o'clock in the morning is fine as long as you're falling asleep at 10. So you get your full 7 hours if you're in your, between the ages of, let's say 20 and 60 years old or 50 years old.
Do you think it's different for women and men as far as how much sleep they need? Or do you think it's 7 for everybody?
More men snore than women. But
that's statistically true?
That's statistically true. It's like 60-40 of the snorers out there. 60% are men. But the problem is women have mild apnea, but it can affect them endocrinologically or within their hormones more.
Which could have more of a systemic effect.
Exactly, especially in a more, let's call it, emotional standpoint. Yep. The levels of hormones fluctuating, progesterone, estrogen, including serotonin, can really affect females a little bit more. So even the mildest form of apnea can show more severe symptoms for a woman than it can a man.
So in that, do you think women need more sleep, less sleep, or do you think it's the same either way? It's just that apnea has an impact that may be harder on women.
So I've read sleep studies that, yes, women typically need more sleep. On an average, the studies have shown 30 minutes or so. Yep. We call it beauty sleep.
Yep.
And so they do tend to have a need for that a little bit more because of the hormones.
Okay, cool. If you have a partner, you literally wake up from them snoring and it's super loud, or they seem like they're struggling to breathe, what's the best thing you could do for them?
Yeah. So
in the moment, I mean, obviously recommend they go get the device, but in the moment, what can you do to help them breathe or to get them out of that?
Typically, it's to nudge them to put them on their side. Because when you're on the side as opposed to on your back, gravity doesn't pull the tongue back against the roof of the mouth as much. So that kind of helps. The problem is a bed partner can't really do much besides, get annoyed, wake up 3-4 times themselves, and that affects their sleep, their well-being.
Yep.
I always say if your bed partner is complaining, you're doing some damage medically to your bed partner, let alone psychologically. The patients who are divorced and now they're trying to date again, and their husbands or wives in the past tolerated it, or they slept in different bedrooms, or they were heavy sleepers. Now they're up against a little bit of an embarrassing, roadblock, and
it could be a matchmaking issue.
Absolutely. Let's be real. You get intimate for the first time, and the next morning, the person sleeping next to you is like, "I'm good,"
Yeah.
and then you start doubting yourself in many different ways. And so, you don't know until you have a device that you can probably record yourself. I like Snore Lab. It's an app that you can kind of measures and picks up snoring sounds. Of course, if you have a dog or something that snores in the room, it'll pick up that. So be careful with that. You can't really do much besides embarrassingly kind of say, "Hey, babe, I believe that you were, making a little noise. I'm worried that you're not breathing. You should probably get it checked out." It's an uncomfortable conversation, but it's one to be had because most people don't even know that they're doing this.
And you're saying that sounds like pretty simple solutions these days that are quite effective. It's just a matter of taking the time to get it done.
Yeah.
You mentioned kind of in passing that during COVID, there's so many times I've heard people reference COVID where the innovation came from, and pretty amazing, but that you created your own sleep supplement.
Yeah. I get patients, 5 to 10 patients a day coming in for me to check their mouthpieces, make sure everything looks good. There's some attachments there. I make sure. And when they were coming in, I'm like, "So how's it going?" And during COVID time, and especially in the beginning, "Oh, everything's great. I'm not snoring still, but I can't fall asleep." I'm like, "So, okay, so what are you doing?" Tylenol PM, Advil PM, Benadryl, Xanax.
So bad.
Restorol, marijuana, three glasses of wine.
Marijuana is probably the best solution out of all of those.
Out of all of them, relatively
speaking,
speaking, yeah. And then I started looking at it and going, I had some problems too. I'm a dentist working in the mouth. I'm like, man, am I going to get COVID? What's going to happen?
Totally.
So as a biochemist major in heart back in the 90s, I got in the driver's seat and I formulated RADZs after the RAD brand, which is my last name. So RADZs can effectively help someone fall asleep and stay asleep with natural ingredients. One of them being an herb, not chamomile, but valerian root.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big things that I've put in there that's very unique is an ingredient called N-acetylcysteine, or NAC. Now, if you Google NAC,
breathe.
Yep, you got it. If you Google, and it was used very well in COVID.
Yeah,
and most people
found it hard on the shelf for a while because everyone was taking it.
You got it. And so I knew that, and I'm like, Googled N-acetylcysteine and sleep apnea. NIH.gov studies showing lower of AHI or apnea indexes, or that score that comes out of that sleep study, by 30%.
30% just by
subbing with NAC. And that's at NIH.gov, National Institute of Health.gov study. Just sleep apnea and snoring, sleep apnea and N-acetylcysteine. You will see that study pop up on the top of Google. And so I put that ingredient into things like L-theanine and valerian root and tryptophan found in turkey and all that.
Oh yeah, tryptophan's found in a lot of meat, but turkey gets the point usually. Yep. And then L-theanine has become incredibly popular in like everything now. I think like a lot of the drinks, and I take L-theanine with caffeine as a stack because you get less of a crash and it sustains the energy, but it does help by effective amino acid helps you mellow out. So I can see how you're using it. And then melatonin, but just a little bit.
Just a little bit, 2.5 milligrams. You don't want to ever take on your own more than 5 milligrams at a time of melatonin. It can actually affect your natural production.
And with melatonin, with that supplement, when would you recommend taking it?
Like 20, 30 minutes before. And I would tell you there's some patients that they take half a Xanax bar before they go to sleep, and they start taking Radz's. It will take at least a few days, if not a couple of weeks, for it to kick in and help. But about 4 out of 5 patients love it, and people love it out there just because it doesn't affect your liver and your kidney like all the other stuff that we mentioned. And more importantly, some people like to drink, and what we've noticed that the N-acetylcysteine and the L-theanine are very good anti-hangover things. So before you fall asleep, you take that, you feel a little bit less foggy and groggy the next day.
Yeah, it's true. Where can people find the product?
Radzz.com is you go direct to the website. I have a bunch of other products. The grinding of the teeth has become a big issue, clenching, grinding, because of anxiety and stress, also kind of induced by COVID. And I would tell you, so many people, it's about a 4-fold increase I'm seeing, and dentists are seeing in the how much people are clenching, grinding their teeth, jaw problems and whatnot. So I also have a supplement for the jaw that helps with clenching and grinding with magnesium in it, because it helps reduce the clenching. Fish oil, MSM, chondroitin sulfate, glucosamine, joint stuff.
Big fan of MSN.
Yeah, exactly. And so all these 7 ingredients in Rad Jaw helps with the jaw issues that people are having, the popping and clicking sound every time. If people are doing a lot of gum chewing, no, not a good thing.
Not a big fan of gum.
Mewing or whatnot can really start affecting your jaw, because we're already taking our anxiety into bed and we clench down as a tight kind of fight or flight response. And you do the gum, you do the ice chewing. I'm also not a big fan of raw whole almonds. I like sliced almonds. Still have your nuts, but almonds crack teeth like crazy.
As a dentist, you've just seen too many cases,
And it's been 22 years of practicing. The last 3 years, I've seen an explosion of almonds cracking teeth and causing more TMJ issues or jaw issues.
So in the last 3 years, you've seen more cases. Is this anecdotal, experiential? Is there data that backs this up? Because it sounds like you're saying like something's going on.
I honestly think that people are just have a lot more on their plate. I usually typically get 200 text messages a day, dozens of emails. We didn't used to do that when we were younger. Not to mention that you have more tasks that your mind is overly thinking, and then you're supposed to shut it off, try to sleep. And sleep apnea, by the way, when your mouth is open, you're snoring, and all of a sudden you get an apneatic event, you clench down. And so apnea or airway issues are related to jaw and clenching issues. I mean, I've had 16, 17, 18-year-olds that I'm putting Botox in the cheek muscle and the temporalis to soften it so they're not clenching as hard. Teenagers used to not have jaw issues when I was practicing in early 2000 or even mid 2010 on. It's been more in the last since 2020 that I've seen this.
That's a novel treatment. I mean, I see why it works, but it's a botulism that essentially
relaxes the muscle.
Muscle,
so you're not clenching as hard.
Yeah. So you could do it in the jaw. That makes sense. Wild. I didn't know that was a treatment. And then TMJ, that's a lot of people have neck pain and jaw pain related to that. Really cool. You had brought up a pretty interesting stat that falling asleep at the wheel was like having
0.10 alcohol level,
0.10,
which would mean you would be
over
arrested.
the legal limit.
Yeah. Yep.
And 4% of all accidents are caused by
people falling asleep at the wheel.
Yeah.
And the scary part is I thought it wasn't going to happen to me. I never, I didn't think it,
Were you, just out of curiosity, were you exerted, super tired, more than usual, and you were just pushing yourself?
Yeah, I was tired. It was, 10 o'clock at night. I didn't have any alcohol in my system or anything like that. But, I've noticed it happened before too. It was like, and then you kind of like, hit the little, and you go, oh. Yeah. And you try to open the window or, and unfortunately, my main focus is truck drivers, MTA, train, airplane, pilots. I do help several pilots. I have 16 people.
Pilots is pretty scary. And it's hard for them to wear a CPAP machine while they're, doing long routes with the other pilot for an international flight. And so UPS truck drivers, FedEx, they're driving trucks. So it's a concern. And so I love corporations that have truck drivers or drivers period, like Amazon. And that's a liability. Imagine them falling asleep at the wheel. And a lot of these people, unfortunately, if you're not healthy or you do have issues like obesity or whatnot, you have a higher tendency to fall asleep at the wheel. Well, I got a couple of rapid fire questions. This has been awesome. I feel like I've learned a few things here to take back with me. If you could have a billboard in downtown LA, what would your billboard say?
I would probably say, would you want better quality sleep? And that's it. Like, and I think, like, I don't know. There's
question mark.
Question mark.
Yep.
You know, and call Dr. Rad. And so, because it's just, I'm so passionate about it because I've seen so many people suffer. I've had patients that are my dental patients. I'm like, you know what, John, you're not, I can tell you're not breathing. No, doc, I'm okay. Boom. 2 years later, massive stroke, 38 years old. He's holding his left arm, can't move it, comes to my office, teary-eyed. You were right. I don't want to be right. You know, and you don't want to, at any age, have a heart attack, fall asleep at the wheel, have these medical conditions that are so hard to reverse, and all because, including cancer, all because you didn't want to know and take a home sleep test and take the time. Knowledge is power. You know, you go blood tests from time to time to see your levels. A home sleep test is so easy nowadays. Get tested to see where you're at.
What blood test can you take that you just referenced? What would you take?
No, I'm just saying that people do go in for blood tests.
So it's the same kind of effort.
It's like you try to watch your health in certain aspects. I actually think that every physician should be offering sleep studies every 5 years as a screening tool.
Just based on the stats,
just based on the stats. Cardiologist, by definition, if you've had a heart attack, you're getting a sleep study. Oncologists, if you're a cancer patient, when I get a cancer patient coming in, they've lost their hair, they're wearing a hat, and they're asking no dental x-rays. And of course, you know, we don't unless it's an emergency basis because they're already getting radiation. I ask them right away, how well do you sleep at night? My doctor never, physician never said anything about sleep. And it just, you know, we gotta, there's so many things we got on our plate as physicians do, dentists do. I'm looking for cavities and braces and this and that and implants, but nothing beats treating someone for sleep or helping them get tested and then ultimately just the mood, energy, everything, let alone their medical well-being.
Yeah, that's powerful. 30% of people dealing with sleep apnea and all the downstream implications of not managing it. It's something that's so much easier to manage than it used to be. One last question. What do you hold as popular, or what do you hold as true that is unpopular or controversial?
This has nothing to do with sleep.
Doesn't have to.
But I'm a big believer in masculine energy being part of our, and not being toxic masculine energy, and part of the men leading and providing and protecting as being super important, and women entering their feminine energy because they are so fed up in being in their masculine energy and trying to lead and become career oriented, which by all means go ahead, but they're kind of burnt out. And so if the man can lead in his masculine without being toxic and emotionally be mature and not lead with their ego, lead with compassion and empathy and understanding, which I do in my dental practice. I lead, I tell what my patients need, I decide for them. That's my masculine. But at the same time, I go, Sabastian, you're doing great. We'll take good care of you. You're a great patient today. Let me know how I can service you. And that's my feminine. And it's okay for men to be in their feminine. And I think that, it doesn't sound sexist. It's just the right balance of relationship to be able to communicate that way and to treat your partner or anyone that is the opposite sex.
Do you think it's interesting that we live in a culture, and in all fairness, I understand why you would regard that as an unpopular thing to say. How did we get here that would be unpopular to say?
Yeah, I think that
because I think it's so beautifully said, and I agree.
Yeah, it became unpopular because it sounds like you're being anti-feminist and anti-women's rights, and it has nothing to do with that. I have a daughter, and I wish she could be the president of the United States or CEO of anything. But at the same time, I think she likes to become a mother. She wants to natural tendencies of being in her feminine energy, being more intuitive, being more compassionate. If you look at kindergarten through 5th grade, majority of the teachers are female.
Yep. That
doesn't mean that there's no space for males, but they just have more patience. And nurses, male and female, but the majority are female. Firefighters, majority are male. It's not a equality is there, hopefully, and there's no sort of sexism, but that's why I think there's a little bit of pushback because people are worried that they're going to go back to what it was pre-60s, where a woman couldn't even back then get a loan for a home without a signature. Yeah, or a credit card, which is sad and crazy. But energy is different. Masculine energy is different. It's just being decisive. Hey, sweetie, you know, I feel like sushi tonight. Let's go to our favorite place. How does that sound? 8 o'clock. Perfect. As opposed to, where do you want to eat? Well, I don't know. Where do you want to eat? It's such a common complaint from women to men. Yep. It's like, just tell me what you want. I've already made 50 decisions at work today. You know, I kind of want to have you make that decision and lead in such a simple thing. I still believe in opening the door, you know, for a woman, including your own daughter. I do believe in walking on the side of the street that, you know, is towards the traffic as a man, and curbing any sort of traffic and those are the basic protective things that we can do. We are built as men to become providers, no matter who you are, no matter what you look like. Beauty doesn't matter. It's a struggle. Men are feeling fatigued. They are feeling that they're not good enough. They're not appreciated. That's the struggle I think we're dealing with. So a little bit of kind words of affirmation would be great, you know, from women to men and vice versa.
I love what you're saying. And this is a whole other podcast. Maybe we could run this back again, but when we react to air, we ultimately just cause more air. And we've gone so far the other direction from a position of a wound that we're creating the wound again in the opposite sex. And not enough people are seeing that yet. And that's a problem, because we're not healing. We're just creating more issues, which tells me it's not coming from a mature whole place. It's coming from wound. And that's what wounds do. Wounded people just create more wounded people. And so you do feel this. And I have a lot of male clients who are lost in trying to understand what masculinity even is anymore. And I have a lot of female clients that are desperately wanting men in their life. It's like, well, how did we get here? And I think the only way we're going to solve it is to figure out what decisions did we make consciously or unconsciously to get to this point, and then what do we do about it? And I agree with you. I think the world is a safer, better place when men show up in a healthy masculine, and I think the world is a beautiful place when women show up in the feminine. Now, are there exceptions? Sure. I think there are men who are more feminine. I think there are women who are more masculine, but those would be the exceptions, not the rule. Right. And I think we're causing a lot of harm right now because we want to advocate like crazy for the exception, and we want to pretend the exception is suddenly the rule. And it's like, wow, you want to create a wild society, play that game.
Yeah, and ultimately, if you're not kind to yourself and accepting to yourself, self-love is a very, very powerful thing to ask for. Yeah. That means you have unconditional love of yourself. That means when you look in the mirror, you're not judging your face, your body, your attitude, your income, your relationships. That's very challenging. But if you can accept yourself, you start accepting other people. If you're not kind to your own physical and emotional well-being, how are you going to be kind to somebody? You know, one of the best things I've learned is if I judge you, Sebastian, on anything that you do, your vulnerability goes down. If I judge you, I'm criticizing you technically. And when your vulnerability goes down, your walls go up, and there go the communication, there goes the relationship, and anything with your kids, with your partner, with your coworkers or employees or employer. You got to have a little bit more acceptance, but it starts with accepting yourself. And if there are parts of you that you don't like, get it solved for. You know, there's always therapy, there's always the gym, part of being an adult. And then once you see you're happy with yourself, those other things that people show you from there, it doesn't bother you as much.
Yeah, beautifully said. Beautifully said. I agree 100%. It's when I see people show up in a way that is hurtful and deeply disrespectful to others, the first thing I'm usually thinking is, what is going on in this person's world that they think this is the best way to show up right now? Like, it literally, normally I have compassion, not always, but mostly I have compassion for the person. It's like, what happened here?
Right.
And to me, all love starts as self-love. I think it's very hard to love another, truthfully, if you haven't first learned how to love yourself and accept yourself. And you're exactly right about judgment. Judgment creates, by definition, separation between that we are judging and ourselves, which surrenders our ability to influence, right? So it's not a very useful thing to do, although it is impulsively habitual for humans to do. And remembering that which you judge judges you back. Right? And if you truly understand that, you'll surrender judgment. It's just not useful. Instead, seek to understand.
Yeah, and the criticism that men get from a partner makes you feel like your testosterone levels deplete. And so what do? Your ego comes out. And when your ego comes out and you attack the person who just criticized you for not putting something away at the house or not doing an errand right, then when you attack, your partner's oxytocin levels go down. They don't feel safe anymore. So it's a cycle.
No, it's a negative cycle.
And so it behooves us as men to kind of like stand back and be like, you know, thank you for the criticism in our heads. Yeah. I don't necessarily agree with that in my head, but tell me how that feels. What is it? How do you feel about that when I do X, Y, and Z? Oh, I don't feel safe. I don't feel happy. I feel anxious. I feel angry. Trust me, that's not my intention. If you care about a human being and you're with that person, whether it's a friend or a partner, your intention is not to give those negative emotions. And when you express that, that de-escalates the situation and the fight and causes more vulnerability and more connection and hopefully a better relationship.
This has been beautiful. Dr. Rad, I've super enjoyed this conversation. Thank you. We'll have to do it again.
Thank you, Brett. Appreciate it.